when you hurt people, they will revenge, and then you fight again, never stop. So you just smile, make people happy, then we'll stop war.
The early martial arts films were significantly slower, more ostentatious, and far less based in truth than the heart-pounding extravaganzas of today. Then something happened. Someone, actually. On screen, one man did more than fight. He blew apart. His demeanor was commanding, his attacks were lightning swift, and his worldview questioned conventional wisdom. He did more than perform. He revolutionized a whole subgenre. But how did the actions of a single combatant revolutionize the film industry? By the way, what did he do that caught everyone off guard? If we can stay up, let's walk inside the picture. It was common for films depicting martial arts to be sluggish, exaggerated, and unnecessarily dramatic before Bruce Lee came along. The fight scenes were more like dance routines than actual combat due to the heavy reliance on stylized choreography rather than true technique. The dramatic and expansive movements were meant to amuse, but they lacked the reality of genuine martial arts. These depictions placed an emphasis on tradition or mysticism rather than the actual physicality, swiftness, or ferocity of a battle. In most media, martial artists played supporting roles, and their abilities were more for show than substance. Bruce Lee utterly transformed this norm. His groundbreaking style of action cinema was all the rage when he broke into the industry in the early 1970s. An explosive, fast-paced fighting style that emphasized genuine combat principles, direct attacks, swift movement, and lethal power was popularized in films like The Big Boss, 1971, Fist of Fury, 1972, and particularly Enter the Dragon, 1973. Bruce achieved the impossible: movie-quality martial arts without sacrificing realism. His Jeet Kune Do training, which emphasizes flexibility and the elimination of superfluous motions, looked fantastic on film, giving the impression of raw, physical aggression with each punch and kick. When thinking about Bruce Lee's impact, his work with the camera stands out as particularly revolutionary. The directors requested that Bruce slow down his motions during filming due to the intensity of his pace, in contrast to the actors who slowed down for dramatic effect. Particularly noticeable with the 24 FPS OSD at the time was the fact that his punches were often so rapid that they seemed as blurs on the footage. Slow motion was a need for directors to let viewers follow their method. Redefinition of realism revolutionized action cinema and raised the bar for martial arts filmmaking. The revolutionary impact of Bruce Lee has far-reaching consequences. The death of this legend in 1973 unleashed a martial arts renaissance on the world of international film. Legends that trace their roots back to Bruce include Matrix-style storyboarding and the portrayal of action heroes, such as Jet Li, Jackie Chan, and Donnie Yen, who popularized their own martial arts styles. Bruce Lee was instrumental in elevating martial arts from a specialized cultural practice to a universal metaphor for personal power, self-control, and individuality. He did more than make martial arts films popular. He gave them real force. A single frightening action, though, was all it took to feel Bruce's influence. Not only on film, a punch of just 1 inch. Some consider Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch to be the most famous martial arts move of all time because of the tremendous force it can produce with such a small amount of space. This technique is exactly what it sounds like, a deadly blow thrown with 1 inch or less of space between the puncher's fist and the target. It may look miraculous to the uninitiated, but the move is actually based on biomechanical expertise, explosive energy transfer, and pinpoint accuracy. At the 1964 Long Beach International Karate Championships, Bruce astonished spectators by sending opponents reeling backward with what appeared to be no wind-up, launching him to fame and bringing the 1-inch punch into the public eye for the first time in the early 1960s. Bruce learnt the one-inch punch in his early days of Wing Chun training with Grandmaster Ip Man. Techniques like the one-inch punch have their roots in Wing Chun's emphasis on close-quarters combat and efficient, straight punches. After studying Western boxing, physics, and body mechanics on his own, Bruce combined Wing Chun concepts with them to further perfect the move. In order to make the most of his limited range of motion, he tried out different positions, rotated his hips, and adjusted his muscle alignment. Bruce trained tirelessly every day to perfect the technique, which calls for tremendous strength as well as lightning-fast timing, explosive muscle control, and synchronization. The iconic one-inch punch is unique not just for its physical force, but also for the meaning it represents. Effectiveness, not tradition, is paramount in Bruce Lee's tenets, and sometimes simplicity is more powerful than complexity. In eliminating unnecessary motions to reach the purest, most effective form, the punch encapsulated Lee's whole conceptual foundation for martial arts. James DeMille, one of Bruce's students, claims that the master never came up with the idea for that punch from fresh, but rather refined an existing Wing Chun technique to make it more powerful, quicker, and more accurate than anything that had come before. Because of the tremendous power that his little frame could produce, Bruce exhibited this maneuver ad nauseum, once even knocking over a guy who was seated in a chair 16 feet away. The one-inch punch continues to captivate martial artists, scientists, and fans even after all these years since Bruce's passing. Except for Bruce, very few have ever been able to execute this technique with the same fluidity and efficiency. Films and scientific studies on its biomechanics have elevated the one-inch punch to the status of a legendary icon of Bruce Lee's brilliance. Along with its fighting prowess, the one-inch punch is a daring statement about the power of self-discipline, physiological awareness, and mental concentration to produce extraordinary results. It is one of Bruce Lee's enduring legacies in the history of martial arts. The famed martial arts skills of Bruce Lee weren't based only on innate ability. Rather, his peak physical condition was the product of an unforgiving training routine that tested the limits of human endurance. Every day, Lee practiced the idea that he had always believed in, that in order to be the best, one had to train harder than everybody else. Linda Lee, Bruce's widow, claims that he was an avid exerciser who would do push-ups or kicks even when he wasn't performing. He trained in a comprehensive manner, integrating explosive power, agility, speed, endurance, and flexibility. He trained for practicality, efficiency, and actual fighting performance, not only for show or brute might. Fundamental to Bruce Lee's training regimen was his emphasis on abdominal strength. He created complex abdominal strengthening exercises, the most well-known of which being the dragon flag, since he thought the abdomen region was crucial to nearly all martial arts movements. After Sylvester Stallone made it famous in Rocky IV, this core exercise entails keeping your body in a straight line, contacting a bench just at the shoulders, and controlling the lowering and raising of your legs. Lee exhibited his unparalleled core stability and muscle coordination by doing this maneuver with remarkable accuracy and control. Bruce Lee performed strength feats that would astound even the most seasoned athletes when he put all these techniques into action, including the Beyond the Dragon flag shoulder push. Reportedly, he is capable of performing over 1,500 push-ups simultaneously, including 400 with one hand, 200 with 2 fingers, and 100 with only his thumb. His pull-up strength would astound anybody. He could do hundreds of one-arm pull-ups, an accomplishment that is difficult for even the best athletes to do. Because his punches might demolish regular punching bags, he even invested specially reinforced ones. His explosive force, control, and technical ability were on full display here, not just as party tricks. Bruce Lee is very unique because to his scientific understanding of training. he never stopped exploring new avenues for performance enhancement, including kinesiology, anatomy, nutrition, and more. As a young martial artist, he didn't consider aerobic fitness as an auxiliary to his training, even though most of his contemporaries worried that adding muscle through weightlifting would slow them down. Bruce worked out his physique in a controlled environment as if he were a live bullet. People often mistakenly believe that maintaining fitness means not looking like a bodybuilder. But in reality, there's no stopping it. His renowned dedication was just as impressive as his fighting prowess, and his training methods would go on to inspire sportsmen of all stripes, from martial artists to fitness fanatics, even in modern times. Bruce Lee's incredible speed was breathtaking to behold, but it pushed the boundaries of what was possible in cinematic technology during the 1960s and 1970s. Because Lee was moving so quickly, his movements could not be recorded clearly at a period when most cameras ran at 24 frames per second. Because the camera couldn't capture the complete trajectory of Bruce's punches and kicks, the directors and editors swiftly recognized that during combat sequences, he seemed nearly still or hazy on film. Due to the rapidity of his blows, spectators have to make technological changes in order to keep up. Filming the Green Hornet brought this issue to light, since his actions had to be slowed down to make them visible to the audience. The fact that Lee could land as many as 9 punches in a single second is often touted as evidence of his incredible speed. He could launch a kick at a pace of around 600ths of a second, which was quicker than what most cameras could handle back then. Even seasoned filmmakers and cinematographers were taken aback by this. Not just did martial artists. They rethought the choreography and filming of his combat scenes, at times instructing Lee to purposefully slow down his tactics for the camera to follow his movement. Despite working in an industry that relies heavily on visual impact and movement, Bruce was ahead of his time in terms of technology. Even while reviewing the film behind the scenes, producers said that Bruce's co-stars always seemed excited about getting struck, something that the viewer never sees. It then provided the misleading appearance that Ahmed's opponents crumbled since his punches were moving too fast for the camera to catch. The result was a lot of slow-motion reshoots, and in a few extreme instances, the filmmakers had to resort to slow motion merely to make their movements visible to the audience. Regardless of these solutions, his quickness was a defining feature of his acting skill, elevating it to the level of a superhuman attribute and setting him apart from other action performers. With today's digital cameras capable of ultra-high frame rates, filming at Bruce Lee's pace is a piece of cake. However, he was an innovator in his day, challenging Hollywood to push the boundaries of filmmaking technology. Not only did his unparalleled speed impress martial arts enthusiasts and practitioners, but it also revolutionized the filming of battle sequences. Not only was Bruce Lee too quick for his opponents, but he also outpaced the media designed to highlight him. An unusual combination of physicality and cinematic disruption propels him into the hallowed halls of cinematic legend status. It frequently felt more like magic than martial arts when Bruce Lee displayed his incredible speed. A seemingly little coin trick became one of the most famous examples of his incredible reflexes, as it stunned onlookers. As soon as he moved, he would tell whoever was holding out their hand to close it, even if it was just a cent. In earlier iterations of the trick, Bruce would seize the coin and, before their fingers could close, swap it out for another coin. This was an unfiltered exhibition of human agility, reflexes, and accuracy, rather than conventional magic. As Bruce Lee's reputation as a fighter and a man with nearly supernatural mastery over his body grew, this technique came to symbolize his almost mythological talents. He had spent years practicing deliberately and intensely, so his reflexes weren't only quick. Among Bruce's many ways for improving his response time were speed training and hand-eye coordination drills. This coin trick was only one example of how he put his training into practice. Anyone who dared to question his timing was taken aback, since it was genuine and not rehearsed or pre-planned. Additionally, there's the anecdote surrounding Bruce Lee, who had a significant role in adding to his aura of mystery, and who has verged on crossing over into mythology. Both casual viewers and serious practitioners of martial arts had the belief that superhuman speed was possible. Even while his blows were well known from films like Enter the Dragon and Fist of Fury, it was his off-screen achievements that gave him his legendary status. The notion that Bruce Lee was more of a phenomenon than an actor or athlete, someone whose work few could even begin to comprehend, let alone replicate, was further cemented. Word of Bruce Lee's rapid reflexes continues to circulate, occasionally sounding ridiculous, even decades after his death. Trusted witnesses, including Bruce's pupils and film cohorts, attested to several achievements, unlike overblown fables. Bruce became more than just a martial arts expert at that time. It became a symbol of what the human body and mind are capable of when pushed to their limits. In this sense, Bruce Lee is more than a philosopher and martial artist. He is a living magician whose paradoxical legacy continues to challenge and amaze generations after his death. Beyond his martial arts skills, Bruce Lee broke down cultural and racial barriers that have long marginalized Asian performers in Hollywood. Prior to Lee, Asian characters in Hollywood films were frequently shown in demeaning stereotypes or given little screen time. In response, Bruce pushed for genuineness and reverence for Chinese culture. His breakthrough came with 1973's Enter the Dragon, the first Hollywood film to feature a Chinese martial artist in a leading role, which attempted to appeal to a worldwide audience. The picture's enormous popularity demonstrated that Asian performers could front a blockbuster and garner worldwide attention, even if he died before it came out. Rewriting the storyline was at the heart of Bruce Lee's struggle for stardom in Hollywood. He insisted on being portrayed as the protagonist, a thinker, and a warrior, rather than the traditional meek, one-dimensional part that Asian actors were given. He was fearless in his parts, portrayed strong characters, and commanded the stage with only his presence. Actor and director Spike Lee became an icon of individuality, pride, and defiance against prejudice, motivating subsequent generations to break free of the constraints imposed by their profession. Bruce revolutionized the action genre by proving that martial arts could have philosophical significance, emotional depth, and cinematic weight beyond just being an exotic display. The film Shaolin Temple, which starred Jet Li and exposed the world to genuine Shaolin Kung Fu and legitimate Wushu in 1982, was a watershed moment in Li's meteoric climb to fame. His serene, controlled demeanor and deft, flowing movements charmed audiences in China and beyond. Jet Li, who was a national Wushu champion from an early age, brought a style of performance-based martial arts to the big screen that was characterized by control, balance, and grace. Jet was more trained in the art of formal competition and spiritual discipline than Bruce Lee, whose background was in street fighting and sheer might. Jet Li's portrayal of Wang Fei hung in Once Upon a Time in China propelled him to stardom in the 90s and beyond among Chinese martial arts films. Not only were his martial arts skills on display in these films, but he also embodied the ancient Chinese values of bravery, humility, and honor. Jet Li's characters were generally historical figures or cultural icons who battled to defend communities and ideals, in contrast to Bruce Lee's solo warriors who confronted oppression directly. In contrast to Bruce's grounded, explosive action, his approach was markedly more cinematic, with his acrobatic flair and wire-assisted acrobatics. Following in Bruce Lee's footsteps 30 years earlier, Jet Li went the Hollywood route. Enter the Dragon proved that an Asian action hero could star in a globally popular picture. And Bruce had long battled against racial stereotypes in Hollywood. The stage was already prepared for Jet when he arrived in Hollywood in the late 90s. In his breakthrough role, a silent but lethal villain in Lethal Weapon 4, 1998, his lightning speed and pinpoint accuracy made him the showstopper. Simply because Bruce opened the doors, the crowds were taken aback by such an appearance. The groundbreaking 2000 film Romeo Must Die, which Jet Li co-starred with Aaliyah, made history by making Li the first Chinese martial artist to star in a major American action romance picture. Bruce Lee had hoped to achieve the same thing before his untimely death. Even though Jet chose his own path, he never once denied that Bruce's efforts and sacrifices had paved the road for his success. It was not Jet Li's natural ability that led to his success in the West. Rather, he followed in Bruce Lee's footsteps, proving that Asian martial artists could be just as successful as anybody else on the world stage. Although they are both legendary in the martial arts film genre, Bruce Lee and Jet Li couldn't be more unlike in appearance and acting. It was through intellectual rebellion and random encounters on the street that Bruce Lee developed his fighting style. In his pursuit of pragmatism and flexibility, he abandoned conventional martial arts training and created Jeet Kune Do, a hybrid fighting technique that prioritizes quick reflexes and less motion wasted. His kicks were powerful and his punches were devastating, and the realistic violence he displayed in fight sequences was palpable in films like Enter the Dragon. Bruce personified unbridled power on television with his violent and domineering demeanor. The beautiful and highly regimented Chinese martial art of wushu, on the other hand, was Jet Li's groundwork. Jet became a national wushu champion in China before breaking into the film industry. He began training at a young age. His movements are nearly balletic, and he places an emphasis on fluidity, accuracy, and elegance in his technique. Acrobatics and wirework are commonplace in Jet's performances, in contrast to Bruce's grounded close-quarter fights, as shown in films like Once Upon a Time in China. He depicts a philosopher warrior in motion whose characters frequently exemplify virtues like honor, tradition, and serenity. Thus, these fundamental differences are reflected in their celluloid personas. Legend has it that Bruce Lee fought injustices alone, both on screen and off. He was unafraid to challenge power, and his films were a platform from which he spoke out against racism and martial arts dogmatism. On the other hand, Jet Li was known for embodying culturally significant characters from history or mythology who exemplified discipline and virtue. Whether he was playing a Shaolin monk or Wang Fei Hung, Jet always brought an air of spiritual strength to his roles, even in films that focused less on fighting and more on peace, such as Fearless. These two gentlemen were bound together by a common goal: to make martial arts the universal language of film. Jet Li brought ancient Chinese martial principles to a global audience with his graceful and expressive fighting style, while Bruce Lee shattered cultural barriers and reimagined the Western media's portrayal of martial artists. The combination of one revolutionary firebrand and one disciplined ambassador did wonders for the future of martial arts film. While both Bruce Lee and Jet Li have achieved legendary status as martial artists and international celebrities, their public personas and personal ideologies couldn't be more different. Bruce Lee was an outspoken opponent of dogmatic tradition and a fervent individualist. In martial arts, as much as in Hollywood, he was not hesitant to question established norms. Bruce famously said, "Be water, my friend." In conversations and publications, he explored his philosophy that martial arts should change and adapt. He created Jeet Kune Do as a way to reject orthodoxy and embrace efficiency, directness, and freedom, rather than traditional forms. His on-screen personas embodied this attitude. They were fearless, defiant, and rebellious. Conversely, Jet Li personifies a more contemplative and spiritual outlook. Jet, a devoted Buddhist, thinks that the cultivation of inner calm and discipline is just as important as the acquisition of physical talent in martial arts. In contrast to Bruce, who frequently utilized his public position to challenge norms and tackle problems directly, Jet has always had a quiet and modest attitude. He would rather let his film parts and understated deeds speak for themselves than make bombastic statements about his worldview. Characters that Jet portrays in films like Fearless undergo a metamorphosis from vicious combatants into enlightened warriors, reflecting his personal conviction that power is bestowed via self-control and knowledge. How they dealt with celebrity and the spotlight also reveals this difference. Bruce Lee frequently appeared in interviews to express his opinions on philosophy, martial arts, and identity with conviction and enthusiasm. He was a cultural thinker in addition to a martial artist because of his magnetic personality and brilliant mind. Despite his intelligence, Jet Li has shied away from the spotlight when he's not performing. Jet emphasizes appreciation and respect above comparison and competitiveness, even when questioned about Bruce Lee. He talks with enthusiasm but without fanfare. These two gentlemen were bound together by a common goal: to make martial arts the universal language of film. Jet Li brought ancient Chinese martial principles to a global audience with his graceful and expressive fighting style, while Bruce Lee shattered cultural barriers and reimagined the Western media's portrayal of martial artists. The combination of one revolutionary firebrand and one disciplined ambassador did wonders for the future of martial arts film. One person's opinion has been absent from the discussion up until quite recently. This is no longer the case. Jet Li has been noticeably quiet for many years whenever critics or fans have drawn comparisons between him and Bruce Lee, widely regarded as the pioneer of contemporary martial arts film. Up until now, Jet Li stayed out of the heated discussions taking place in the martial arts community and online over their respective legacies and skill sets. Jet Li shocked fans with his open and unusual statement regarding Bruce Lee's influence on martial arts and film. He freely admitted that Bruce was more than simply a martial artist. He was a visionary who changed the world's perception of martial arts. The Bruce Lee style, a potent synthesis of many disciplines, ideologies, and raw physicality, was Bruce Lee's distinctive contribution, as Jet Li explained. Jet Li made the comment, he put all the bad things together, made it into his own style, in reference to Bruce's talent at absorbing and combining methods from many martial arts to become Jeet Kune Do. The groundbreaking and unrepeatable aspects of Bruce Lee's method, its emphasis on speed, flexibility, and actual combat efficiency, were not just a fighting style for Jet, but a philosophy that went against convention. The modesty of Jet Li's tone was the most remarkable aspect of his remarks. Even though Jet became famous all over the world and became an expert in traditional Chinese wushu, he was humble enough to acknowledge that Bruce Lee was his inspiration. He said that Bruce was helpful in advancing his own career, especially in the entertainment industry. Bruce Lee transformed the narrative, as Jet pointed out, making it very difficult for a Chinese martial artist to star in a Western film prior to him. Both Lethal Weapon 4 and Romeo Must Die, Jet's first features, take place in a world that has long since won the cultural struggle against racism and sexism in martial arts, thanks to Bruce's efforts. Lee gushed about Bruce Lee's physique, describing him as a force of nature. He went on to say that Bruce threw punches at such a high speed that the filmmakers had to slow down the action simply so the audience could keep up. In Jet Li, there was mutual regard rather than animosity. Since Bruce's martial arts style emphasized explosiveness and directness, And Jet's wushu style emphasized control and fluidity. Jet never attempted to emulate Bruce. On one point, though, Jet and the other person are in agreement. They want the world to know about the profound discipline, elegance, and beauty of Chinese martial arts. But for Jet Li, it has expanded the range of these contemplations to something that may have gone beyond the shift in perceptions of martial artists brought about by their rising stardom in Hollywood films. Despite the fact that Bruce Lee was able to make a dent in the problem decades ago, Asian performers were frequently cast in small, cliched roles. Bruce Lee wasn't just practicing martial arts, he was performing identity, observed cinema scholar Brian Hugh. Jet Li recognized this multi-layered material, and he was also changing at the same time as the new representation. For Jet, silence was always an act of respect, never of omission. When Jet spoke out, she was continuing Bruce Lee's heritage of using martial arts as a vehicle for national pride, individual philosophy, and international respect, a lineage that Jet had already acknowledged. Much obliged for your time. Make sure to hit that like button, share your opinions in the comment section, and subscribe for more impactful stories from the history of martial arts if you loved this in-depth look at Bruce Lee's cinematic revolution. Can we go on? You should definitely watch the video that appears next. It's quite captivating.